Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this edition of Telling Our Story in Prince George's County. During February, Black History Month, we celebrate the wonderful and significant contributions of African Americans to our history. Up next, history maker, the Honorable Wayne K. Curry, the first African American Prince George's County executive, joins me to discuss Black history in Prince George's County. I'm your host, Council Chair Andrea Harrison. Telling Our Story in Prince George's County comes your way in just a moment.
At shelters, you'll discover healthy and loving animals just waiting to become a part of your family. Why wait? You can make a difference in the life of an animal. A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person and adopt your new best friend today. To find out more, visit theshelterpetproject.org.
Welcome to Telling Our Story in Prince George's County, a production of the Prince George's County Council. Our story is about caring people and vibrant communities, our children, youth, and families, our great opportunities for culture, and our rich history. A wonderful place to visit, featuring our past, present, and a future full of promise. This is Telling Our Story in Prince George's County. Insight, knowledge, and perspective on the things that matter to us all, with your host, Council Chair Andrea C. Harrison.
Hi, welcome to Telling Our Story in Prince George's County. This program is a production of the Prince George's County Council. I'm your host, Council Chair Andrea Harrison. Telling Our Story in Prince George's County offers a unique opportunity for us to come together and share some of the great stories taking place in our communities. I believe that our success as a county depends in part on our ability to tell our own story and to know our history, and that is why we're here today. February is Black History Month, time to set aside and recognize very special contributions of African Americans to our history and our future. I'm delighted to introduce my guest for the program today, the Honorable Wayne K. Curry. Mr. Curry made history when he became the first African American to serve as county executive for Prince George's County. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me today.
It's my pleasure.
I'm absolutely excited because not only are you a history maker, but you're my friend, and it means a lot to have you on my show to talk about things here in Prince George's County, the history of African Americans, your history, and our future.
Well, it's a real pleasure to join you too. You know, the two of us are lifers in Prince George's County. Right. Our roots grow deep in this soil, and I'm really delighted to be here as well.
Actually, let's just go back and start talking about the roots here in Prince George's County. As you mentioned, we both are lifers, families born, bred, raised right here in the soils of Prince George's County. And so let's just talk about some of the early times, maybe back to, let's talk about the 60s and sort of go forward a little bit.
Wow.
Not that I'm trying to date you or anything,
well,
but.
it's too late for me anyway. I can't hide anything. Let's go back even further. Okay. I can recall my childhood here and the years in the 50s when the place was very different. Largely known for tobacco farms, stars and bars, and all the other things that were typical of any southern state and the hamlets in any southern state. The African American community was small and largely was agricultural and agrarian, you know, working tobacco farms and others around the area. And then, of course, we managed to live in one of the segregated African American enclaves just outside of D.C., growing up beyond Fairmont Heights and North Englewood and the Cheverly vicinity in the 4th Ward of Cheverly. So I remember those days and what it was like. I remember my brother and I and one other guy from the neighborhood integrating the elementary school at Cheverly Tuxedo across the railroad tracks, the proverbial tracks, and remembering that it was a much different place, and that while we were happy as children and unaware of the history and tensions of Prince George's County, that it was even then a unique place and destined to be something special. So when I look back on it now and what happened in the ensuing years, and watch what it has meant, not just to Maryland, but to this country. I mean, it's divine providence that intervened and made Prince George's County a historically significant place. You know, we've had a checkered but very interesting past, and we've come full circle in a lot of ways to reflect the principles that are important to America. It's not enough to talk about diversity locally or in this state or in this country. You have to talk about inclusion. And the battles that were fought in my childhood about both diversity and inclusion were, I think, important ingredients of the later successes I had in politics, at least, and in business as well. So it's been a fabulous place to live.
I'm really kind of excited to talk about this particular subject today because, as you know, and many of our viewers know, I have a very, very strong passion for Prince George's County, just as you do. And we have a lot of people who have moved into Prince George's County who are not natives, who have not experienced the things that we experienced, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s, and who only know it for what it is now. And so I think that it's very, very important. It's important for me to relay the history of Prince George's County, the importance of Prince George's County, the richness of Prince George's County, you know, as a whole, but really as an African American here, and why those of us who are natives, diehard, our blood is in the soil of this county, why we are so passionate about it. And so that's why I'm really, really excited. So we talked a little bit about, you know, the very, very early years. Can we talk, as we move forward, just talk a little bit about the integration, the inclusion, the Cora Rices, you know, we're going to talk about Tommy Broadwater, Bucky Trotter, all of these people and some of the things that occurred. Just kind of walk us through just a little bit.
Well, you know, a lot of people think that the civil rights movement was what they observed on television. And if you're not familiar with what it was like to live up south here, then maybe folks can misconstrue what's happened because of how grand it's been since then. But this was every bit a segregated southern community with everything that went with that, and was and progress was a hard-fought battle. And many of the people you mentioned were neighbors, you know, in the community that I grew up in, you grew up in. They weren't distant figures somewhere else, and God knows we're very proud of what people elsewhere did. But they were people right here in Prince George's County fighting for progress. And so, you know, that's what you grew up with when you looked out the door. Cora Rice, who was a virtual lifetime president of the NAACP locally, was my brother's godmother and lived next door and was fond of whipping our hind parts, you know, when things weren't going just
Which is
so.
something that's missing now. We don't have enough of that
when
going
things
on.
work, I don't know, it seemed to me like it was a whole too much of it going on, but that's a personal bias. You know, no one likes to get caught. But these folks were literally titans. They were icons of progress, and they had guts. They were willing to fight for opportunities for the rest of us, and they were a phalanx of people between their children and all the indignities of segregation. And they fought for that, and that was something that gets into you. It's something that tempers your resolve and your principles, and later becomes, you know, important to what you do. I doubt seriously that I would have had the passionate interest that I've had in public service and public affairs if it hadn't been for those kind of models, those kind of people showing you what the price of being in a community is, you know, and service is the rent you pay for being part of that great expanding. And in Prince George's County, it ultimately culminated in those much later years when I was elected county executive, and a lot of the social warfare was over, or at least wasn't conspicuous anymore. It led to this novelty of Prince George's County, which at the time and remains the only example in American history, not Prince George's County history, not Washington Metro history, not Maryland history, in United States history of a jurisdiction to go from being virtually all white, rural and small when I was a child, to be a majority African American, cosmopolitan, and big by county standards, where income and education went up and not down. Now, I've recited that for decades now, not as an indication of any conceit, but as an indication of the ingredients that we have sitting in front of us to make huge social progress. You know, I'm always fascinated by the old folks. My grandmother could put something on the table. It'd be flour, it'd be sugar, there'd be salt, there'd be baking powder, there'd be milk, there'd be eggs and butter. And I'd get up in the morning and she'd go in the kitchen, whoosh, whip, and there'd be biscuits. And you wait a little while and whoosh, whoosh, there'd be pancakes. You come back in the evening, whoosh, there's cake. There's bread. There's all these things made from the same ingredients. And so when I cite that novelty, and we remain unique, I'm citing it for the purpose of saying that when you've got all those ingredients on the table, you can make a whole bunch of wonderful stuff out of it. And you just need a little know-how, some ingenuity, some guts. You got to take some chances. You got to turn the heat on. Got to crack some eggs, you know. But you can make a lot of wonderful things out of it. And that's the great promise of Prince George's County. We can make a lot of great things here.
So just kind of going back to your interest of public service, or your love of public service, what was the one thing that you think may have led you into politics? What was it that interested you in politics? Because you were actually quite a successful attorney prior to that.
Yeah, there are probably a couple things, some noble and some just downright pugnacious. I remember the Great March on Washington. And I can remember the fear and apprehension that my parents and neighbors had about whether and which kids could actually go attend the march. And of course, I think I was 12 at the time, and my parents were a little shaky about whether or not we'd actually attend, so we went and worked at the church making sandwiches and stuff like that for people who were in the march. And thereafter, my father got a copy of the LP. That's a record for youngsters who don't know any better. That's a disc, a round thing with grooves in it that played noise. Yeah. So anyway, he had an album of the speeches that day. A. Philip Randolph, Martin Luther King, all of them. Walter Reuther, I mean, you name it. And I remember taking that album into my basement and playing the thing, what would be to anybody else ad nauseum, till I had memorized every word that was on that album of Martin Luther King's speech, and heard the resonance of A. Philip Randolph's voice, and then wondered, who are these people? What do they do? Where do they get this from? What puts it in them? So that started it. And, you know, then there were the ensuing years after we integrated the school, and as a result, we were living in the segregated community of the 4th Ward of Cheverly, but going to school through what was then Bladensburg High School, which was essentially, you know, white vocational technical high school with a small college-bound population at the time. And so we were in and out of that tract of education, my brother and I, before the desegregation case was even filed in Prince George's County. And so we had this, what later turned out to be an advantage of growing up here, experiencing that there, and developing a big repertoire that helped. So you've seen that progress can be made. You can win even though you're outnumbered, and you can make wonderful things happen. And that, you know, led into college and stuff. And, you know, I needed a job after I'd done a trek around the country, and came back and got a job down in Upper Marlboro, and that's where it began.
Well, good.
That's where politics began.
Okay. Well, it's time to take a short break. Please stay with us as we talk more about our favorite subject, Prince George's County. Telling Our Story in Prince George's County returns in just a moment.
The first day stepping on the court, I couldn't keep up. That motivated me to step up my game. When I reach a goal, I set a new one the next day. The best feeling is getting to a place you've been fighting for. Tennis taught me to never give up in anything. School, sports, life. Your opponent has to earn their victory. Nothing in life is guaranteed, so education is important. Going to college is one of my biggest goals. I can't wait. Mastering the court takes persistence. So does getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.
Welcome back to Telling Our Story in Prince George's County, a production of the Prince George's County Council. I'm Council Chair Andrea Harrison, your host. When you talk about Prince George's County and Black history, there's a great story to tell. And I have the privilege on this program to tell it with the Honorable Wayne K. Curry, our first African-American county executive, a history maker in his own right. Thank you so much again for being our guest today on Telling Our Story in Prince George's County.
It's a pleasure.
Now, when you became the county executive of Prince George's County, you were one of two Black chiefs across the country.
Right.
And so describe that significance and the historic moment for you, for your family, for Prince George's County.
Right. Well, obviously, it was in some respects a fairy tale. I mean, I'd grown up here when the place was very much different and watched the transformation and been involved in public affairs and helped other people get elected. And then suddenly in that season, in that moment, I'm elected, and I'm the first African American to hold the seat in a county like this. I mean, a great place, one that had been transformed. So I get elected, only to discover that there are two Black elected county executives in the entire country, and to make the contrast even more profound, one of them's on the West Coast in King County, which is the Seattle area, and one of them's me here on the East Coast, just outside D.C. So Ron Sims, who was the King County executive and a great help to me, later we became friends and remain friends to this day. And Ron went on he stayed in it longer than I did. Of course, he wasn't term limited either. But Ron went on to be Deputy Secretary of HUD under President Obama and did a stint there and has now returned to the West Coast. And I, of course, remain active here because I've always been active here. I've helped other people get elected. I love electioneering. I like campaigns. I don't mind rolling my sleeves up. I don't mind taking or delivering an occasional punch to get something positive done. So I enjoy the game.
Speaking of that, you were a very strong supporter of our current county executive, Rashawn Baker. What is your best advice for Mr. Baker and those of us who are presently serving?
Well, I'm a bit of an imp, so my first advice to Mr. Baker is next time don't take 3 elections to get it done. and I've teased him about that. But on a more serious note, for you and for others, when you make the decision to run for public office, you're really deciding that you're going to be a sacrifice. You're a human sacrifice, and your ideals are sacrificial. If you want to be recognized for private gain and personal reasons, then there's a place to do that. It's called the private sector. But when you represent people with the needs that we have, and when you carry the mantle of history that we do, and you represent the novelty that we reflect, then the most important thing for you to recognize that very little of it is about you. Mm-hmm. Almost none of it's about you. Now, we're people, and we've all got egos, and God knows you need that to be able to get up every day and take, the tug of war that's elected office in public policy and politics. I mean, it's a contentious business. I get that, and I don't mind it. But the principal thing is to recognize you're not there for you. You're there for everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so my advice would be never forget that. Get that part right. Yeah, we're all going to have our fights, and of school. I used to play boys club football, and I'd have my little boo-boos and injuries and stuff, but you get up and you play again, because what the ideal is something else. And that would be my advice. Remember, it's not about you. Get that part later.
Let's talk about our local economy here. And under your leadership and guidance as a county executive, this county rose to some very high heights, and we started getting the upscale executive housing communities that you really advocated for. There were many small business initiatives, new large commercial developments such as National Harbor and the Boulevard at Capitol Heights, Bowie Town, set of FedEx Field. And today, you're the president of NAI, the Michael Companies, a company where you attended, actually where you started, and before and during college, I guess? Law school. You went to law school at night while you worked there.
You got quite a little dossier.
Tell us about your role there and what we should now understand about how to attract the quality development in Prince George's County that we all want.
Yeah, that we want and we can have and that we deserve. Well, I've been very fortunate. I've been blessed a lifetime, to have been here and been born the right years to be part of this. But in regard to the company, even more fortunate, because I met Ken Michael when I worked for the then county executive, Winnie Kelly, back in the 70s. I was just a little staffer. Nobody paid much attention to me. I was working days, going to school at night. But I learned there, about what can happen at the intersection of preparation and opportunity. And I learned what can collide at the intersection of business and politics, and saw that the best way to have a great future is to design it and use those forces to design it. So I had gone 3 years of law school at night, and Kelly lost his re-election bid. I lost my job. I had risen high enough, big enough, bad enough, and egocentric enough to be at the top of the food chain, which meant you were among the first executed, by. And so I wound up then going to work downtown at a law firm, and then for Ken Michael at his real estate company, commercial industrial real estate company, and he put me through that last year of law school. I concentrated on real estate and related business stuff, and came out and went to work for the company, was vice president, general counsel. Did that and then joined some law firms, did some other things, came up the business side of things and helped other politicians get elected. Never got the bug out of my system to be a part of advancing. And that worked out well. And then the political years you talked about. But after my stint as county executive, I went to work at a Baltimore law firm with Billy Murphy. And after helping Rashurin, came back and, returned home. And so, I look forward to scratching my initials on some more trees in Prince George's County and watching them grow.
Good. Just recently I held my second annual Get in Step conference, which is a college and career preparatory conference for basically high school students, 8th through 12th grades, really. Because we know that not every child is going to go to college, and many of them will choose trades or some other vocations, and we want them to be prepared for a successful future. That's the bottom line. Not every child is a STEM student, but every child can be successful after high school. And so let me ask, how important do you think the roles of our local colleges and universities, Bowie State, University of Maryland, Prince George's Community College, how important are they in preparing our students for various careers, trades, entrepreneurship, and leadership opportunities?
I think they're critically important. I mean, we're very blessed, one, to live around Rome. Washington, D.C. is the new Rome of this modern era, and all roads lead to Rome. Everybody across this planet comes to Rome, whether they're producing computer chips in the Orient or the Silicon Valley, or whether they're exporting fruits from South America and diamonds from Canada or other places around this planet, technologies, intellectual property, from Europe. Everybody comes to Rome, and we're at Rome's doorstep. So the opportunity is abundant, and being able to take those opportunities just like your grandmama did and make something good out of it is what our challenge is. The ingredients are all sitting there. And everybody doesn't have to go to college, but the colleges are vital to our continued prosperity. When I was county executive, we were the second largest provider of high technology jobs in the state of Maryland. Now, people didn't know that and wouldn't admit it when you held it in front of their faces because it conflicted with a stereotype that they had about what the community was. On the other hand, at that time, we closed down some vocational and skills training centers in our schools. And so we got into, as you said, for example, a housing boom. And who's going to build the house? Nobody ever learned which end of a hammer to hold. They can't very well be a carpenter, you know. And one of the most successful people we know in this community over many years started as a guy who made roof trusses and later became a huge landowner and developer. So our schools are critical to burnishing, polishing up, you know, all of the intellectual stuff. And our schools are critical to teaching skills, even more physical and manual skills. I mean, my brother understands electronics. I don't, you know, and don't want to. And somebody built my house. It'd be great if we were preparing people for all of these opportunities because they lead to the part that's even more critical, which is the entrepreneurism. This country is built on what you can produce that someone wants to buy, and it doesn't much depend on you know, how highfalutin you are in terms of how many initials you have behind your name. It depends on what you can produce, and teaching people to innovate and produce is very important because you can't have a healthy community without a healthy business community, and some of that business community should be native, should be indigenous, should be people that live there.
That's right. You know, I guess we probably have about 2 minutes left.
Well, I can
I'm going to
filibuster
switch.
all through that.
I know you can, but you're not going to this time.
Said no.
You know, it's been a difficult week here in Prince George's County. Actually, in a difficult year, really, for some of our students. We've had several tragic homicides amongst young people here in Prince George's County. And it saddens me that there seems to be a level of hopelessness amongst our young people that they would just find it no problem with taking the life of another person. Where, in your opinion, where do you think we're going wrong? Are we not beating those hind parts enough, as you said earlier? You know, are we, you know, we're all at a loss right now, wanting to know what more can we do?
Well, youngsters, particularly teenagers, have always been puzzles to an older and advanced crowd, every generation. This one's different because of the easy availability of guns and weapons. And because, unlike many jurisdictions around Washington, we opened our borders to everybody who wanted to and could come. And so we've got people who are prepared for these big advances and people who are not. We've got people who had parents who invested heavily and taught and trained, and children who didn't have that advantage. It's all a big melting pot now, a cauldron that we've got to deal with.
Okay. Well, we don't know what the answer is, but we're going to keep working towards it. But that is it for this edition of Telling Our Story in Prince George's County. My thanks to my very special guest, the Honorable Wayne Curry, for all that you've done and what you continue to do to preserve and promote our history, the culture here in Prince George's County. I want to thank you. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in. And remember that Telling Our Story in Prince George's County is a production of the Prince George's County Council. I'm Council Chair Andrea Harrison, your host, and I do love telling our story in Prince George's County.